All right, not because they don't deserve much more, but just because of our time being what it is. I'll be brief on these introductions for our panelists specifically. That I think they each bring something unique to the conversation, and I'm very pleased to present them to you and turn them loose, and I'm hoping I'll be done working here shortly. Kathy Liu, as most of you in this room, if not all of you know, has been an extraordinary civic leader, public official, patron of the arts and nonprofit organizations and the environment for many, many years, and she just keeps coming back and taking on new leadership roles, just as she has done recently as the inaugural chair of the new organization in town, Colorado Springs Forward, which I'm sure she'll be talking about. It's been a pleasure to know and watch Kathy over time. She's a source of inspiration for many, many people. Susan Edmondson, sitting on her left, is an old friend of mine. Susan, for many years, was an entertainment and arts editor at Gazette when I was there as editor, and then she left the newspaper business and has been an extraordinary civic leader in her own right for, I don't know, more than a decade now, right? Susan left the Gazette to become the CEO of the B. Vredenberg Foundation and did extraordinary things in terms of leadership in the arts and cultural development sector. And now is CEO of the Downtown Partnership, and there's a lot of really interesting things going on that I'm sure she'll share a little bit about with us. Hannah Parsons has done lots of interesting things. Most interesting to me, and she needs to talk more about this, is her role in the founding of Epicentral Co-working, which is one of those sort of neat core elements of this, I think, emerging entrepreneurial, innovation culture in Colorado Springs, and she has left there to go out and do other things in terms of her civic leadership role, and I'm sure that will continue over time. But Jason Wood is next in line there, and Jason has been here it seems like a lot longer than like 18 months. Jason came here as one of the senior executives in the Kansas City, Missouri United Way organization, and is CEO here of the Pikes Peak United Way now. He came in here with a commitment to create a new conversation about community life, and has, through his role and with his staff at United Way, engaged in an extraordinary number. I'm not sure, the last one I heard was in excess of 60 community conversations with everyday citizens in this community, talking about their aspirations for themselves and their families, how that relates to our shared community life, and he is continuing on that path as he charts a new focus for United Way, which in part I think is an initiative he can talk about more, cradle to career, which is core in terms of ensuring every one of us in this community has the best possible chance to have an opportunity to fulfill their potential. Finally, one of my favorite people in town is Matt Mayberry. Matt is a director of the Colorado Springs Pioneer Museum, and forget the title exactly, but cultural affairs manager for the city of Colorado Springs. He's involved in sort of everything that the city's involved in related to that. And Matt has a deep, I think, abiding love of the history of our community and an insight into the relevance of our history to the conversation we have today and the conversations we need to have in the future. So with that, I've asked each one of them to make some initial observations based on their own place in leadership in our community and what they heard today from Tom, and then we'll, if need be, prompt them in some other ways, but I don't think I'm going to have to work too hard on that. And we will need to share the mics so that all of this gets captured on our audio. So thanks, guys, for being with us.
Matt Mayberry. And as I was thinking about what Tom said, I liked, or actually John said this, the quote about in order to understand your community, you have to find the right photograph. And that was appropriate for me since we have 80,000 photographs in our collection. So I immediately started thinking, what's that photograph? What's that photograph? And I haven't come up with that one yet, but I did think back to my favorite quote. I'm not sure if this is a parable or not, but my favorite quote about Colorado Springs, and let me step back and say, I've said this to many people, that if you want to understand Colorado Springs, you have to understand three things. And that is Palmer's vision for the town, what he wanted Colorado Springs to be. Number two is our enduring connection to health and healthcare and healthy lifestyles. And number three is the impact of the military in our community. But I think there's a better quote that kind of captures what I think Colorado Springs is. And this was actually a quote from a former mayor, John Robinson. And it was in an essay he wrote in 1901. And I just love this description, and so I'll just read it. From its founding until the present hour, there has been a vision of a city of beauty, culture, righteousness, and health. A city where a man may live, and man I use loosely, but may live a common life for a noble end. And that was the charge that he put out to the citizens at that time. And I think in many ways it captures a better vision of Colorado Springs. Beauty, culture, righteousness, and health than perhaps anything that Palmer ever said. In fact, the other day I was approached by the mayor's staff to provide them with a quote for the Downtown Partnership Breakfast. And that was the one I gave them. That if you want to understand this place, I think that's kind of and it's the term that John and I use a lot, it's our DNA. That's where we start. And I would also add to Tom's comments about who is it that is the keeper of our city parable, and I agree that it's all of us, and we're all challenged with how do we talk about and think about our community. But I would add to the list that you created, respectfully, historians.
Thank you. Just to give a little brief context on what Your United Way has been working on is that we've been partnering with the Harwood Institute here over the last year or so to really go out and listen to the community and making sure we could figure out how to match the head and the heart. We've been utilizing a lot of the quality of life indicators data to affect how we would be doing our funding at Pikes Peak United Way. But really, if it didn't match the aspirations of the community, were we really lining up and making some of the best, more strategic decisions, we thought, as an entity. So again, we've done over 60 plus community conversations where there's about 10 to 12 average people at each one, and they're just average everyday citizens. It's nobody, it's community leaders to we had some with homeless and vice versa, and with our agency partners, et cetera. But I thought it would be good to just kind of give you a little bit of the narrative of what they had shared with us. And these were their comments, and I want to make that clear that they're not United Ways, but really what they are is the community. They desire to live in a more connected, supportive, and safe community. Above all, they said they have lost trust. Trust in their elected official, trust in community leaders, service providers, and even their neighbors. They feel their elected officials and leaders are not working together, nor are they working in the best interest of the citizens. This has led to cynicism about creating a better future for our community. The lack of working together truly frustrates people. The community can't agree on the key issues or how to move forward to address them. They feel this drives young people out of town, prevents supporting kids, creating jobs, and getting help for people who need it. People say they want to come together, build community, come back into the public square, and work on these conditions and issues. They say, in fact, there are some great things happening here, but people don't talk about the successes, but rather focus on why things can't get done. They say they want their leaders to know them better and work together with them. Some of the key issues people want to work on, including supporting our kids, empowering them and motivating them to overcome challenges, and helping them to strive for success. This means giving them opportunities both in and outside of school, as well as during the summer months, more mentoring and stepping stone jobs. They also talk about a need for a stronger workforce and providing adults with more skills training so they can obtain a better job or even to establish a career. Additionally, they said there's a need for more affordable housing and transportation connecting people and jobs. And finally, they talk a lot about the need to care for people who are having difficulty taking care of themselves due to crisis, homelessness, or mental needs. And so we've been really looking at what the head and the heart were saying and created what we call our Cradle to Career Task Force. It's based off a concept of collective impact. And I think you should be happy to know that we had our first meeting about a week or so ago, and there was over 40 plus business and community leaders sitting around the table talking about these issues. The funny part was the first issue that the task force really talked about was trust and connectivity. They said we can never make progress on the issues that you're lining out around education, income, and health until we actually take on the issue of trust and connectivity. And so what we did is had them start lining out successes that have happened in our community to start overcoming that parable of no one talks about them. And it was amazing. Some of these community leaders were struggling and talking about some of the successes they had because we always want to jump to the big idea. And what we're trying to share with them was focus on the small things. What are some of those small wins? And when we said that, we filled up 2 whiteboards full of ideas. And so how do we start talking about that narrative? And so that's what we've empowered them to do in saying, go talk about small wins. Talk about the successes, because hopefully the idea is then that they will roll up into larger ones.
Just over 3 years ago, my business partner Lisa Tesarowitz and I opened Epicentral Co-working to do just what Jason was talking about, to create a space where people can make connections. Generally, entrepreneurs, teleworkers, people who don't identify with any other place, maybe work from home, because we knew that there were other people in the community who felt isolated and wanted to work in a collaborative space. And so I kind of framed this around this as I was looking at the questions and the parable. Who owns the parable? Well, often in Colorado Springs, it feels like the person who owns the parable is the one who speaks the loudest or the fastest. But to me, the answer is that nobody owns the parable. There isn't one story. There isn't one parable. Thomas Friedman has declared this is the age of the sharing economy, which is producing both new entrepreneurs and a new concept of ownership. So the shared or collaborative economy, which is what a workspace was, the co-working space is, and there are other things that exist in the collaborative economy, but it's a socio-economic system built around the sharing of human and physical resources. It includes the shared creation, production, distribution, trade, and consumption of goods and services by different people and organizations. Increasingly, people are renting equipment, taking rides, eating food, and sharing accommodations with total strangers. How many of you have used Lyft or Uber? Okay, getting in the car with total strangers, right? Well, I do it frequently. So technology is changing everything. Ownership is becoming increasingly unimportant. Instead, connection is king. Our identity can't be dictated. The parable cannot be owned. Stories cannot be contained. So when we're talking about managing the perception of our city, we're asking the wrong questions. We need to figure out how do we drive human connection in the community, and because it is that human connection that builds trust. So when we start connecting all of the different parables and seeing all of them as shared assets, I think that's the conversation we need to have.
I just want to share a few really just sort of anecdotes as far as parables. I moved to Colorado Springs in the early 90s, and it was I guess it was 1991, and 1992 was a pretty historic year for our city and our state. That was the year that we had both Amendment 2 and Tabor on the ballot, and that really has somewhat defined our community in many ways through the years. But I have this memory of the late 90s, which was a really great time economically across the country and in Colorado Springs. We had this great airline called Westpac where you could just get on a plane and go somewhere as a mystery destination. I spent pretty much every evening at this great bar called Primitivo having martinis, and it was like the sort of roaring 20s. And my friends would fly off to the Bay Area to meet with angel investors for their new .com, and it was like you knew you were sort of living in this really kind of interesting, historic, fun time. And I remember one night I was watching a David Letterman show, and he was in the audience and was talking to a gentleman in the audience who stood up, and the man was East Asian, Indian descent, and he said, "Oh, sir, where are you from?" And the man said, "Colorado Springs." So I kind of perked up. And then when he said Colorado Springs, Dave instantly said, "Oh, beautiful, beautiful part of the country. Isn't that just wonderful? What do they have there?" And they said, "Oh, yes, Pikes Peak and Garden of the Gods." And then he asked the man, "What do you do?" And he said he worked in the tech field. And I just thought that was who we are, was that diversity, the tech, the beautiful natural environment. And it was sort of where we were headed, and it sort of captured a moment of what we aspired to be and what we actually were at that time. I think we've struggled economically since then, and we've sort of lost ground in some of those areas. But for me, that one little moment sort of captured both authentically who we were and also who we hope to be and who we aspired to be. And then I think more recently too, a time just a year or two ago that shows there's a lot of, again, positive things in our community, a lot of great assets we need to build on, and sometimes they don't always come together and they don't always overlap in terms of the people and the institutions involved. And there was one evening where there was a sort of reception event over at the World Arena, and it was based on a Olympic designation at the World Arena that was, special and really something we're celebrating. And so I went there first, and it was great. The Olympics are a huge part of our community, a huge part of our brand, and it was a really positive thing. And then I got in my car and I zipped over, and that same evening, very last minute, very informally, there was a huge celebration at Ivywild because that was the day they had closed on that property and were beginning to turn that property into what we know it is today as this really interesting, creative, unusual, not typical place. And what I will say is I think I was the only person that was at both events, and they were both filled with really wonderful quality people in our community. But it kind of hurt me a little bit that there wasn't a little more overlap of these sort of different worlds talking together. I think sometimes, and Hannah touched on this as well, sometimes we rely a little bit too much on institutions, and I think the parable is owned by people as individuals coming together, and I think too often we're looking to major institutions to sort of lead that forward. And certainly we know with younger generations and such, they're less likely to be part of a major institution. They're just going ahead and doing it, and they don't really wait for someone else to create the structure that they're going to then be on a board or be a part of. And I think we need to create more space for individuals to sort of pursue their dreams without it being part of some kind of institutional structure.
I like what you said, Susan, about going to several different things in a day or a week or two, and that are not related to each other. Because this is my own personal feeling, is that there is so much great stuff going on in this city every day, and so many fabulous people and organizations and energy, and yet I think many people don't really understand that or take advantage of it because they stay in their own little circle. And I think we've been criticized for many years for working in silos. And I don't remember how many different plans we've had over the last 10 or 12 years. One of the things that Colorado Springs Forward has on its website is a list of all of those, along with their plans and the people who were in them and so on, because I don't think that any of us who are part of Colorado Springs Forward today ever expected to start another organization. We don't think we really need more organizations. But it was a group of people, like most of you in this room, who have lived here quite a long time and are frustrated because we don't seem to be making the progress we should, and we always sort of get there, but then we never reach the tipping point where we go further. And the question is, why is that? And I think the answer is twofold, and hopefully we are at a point right now where I think we have great opportunity to do really wonderful things if we start getting out of our silos and working together more. And that's really the purpose of Colorado Springs Forward, is not to tell people what to do or anything, but just try to be a catalyst and a convener and help groups move forward with the things that they're doing with others who are doing the same kinds of things. In addition to that, I think everybody feels that we have some pretty serious issues with our government today, and part of that's probably due to some of the things in making the change to a strong mayor, which I believe is a very good thing to have done. But there are some issues that probably need to be addressed, and we need to right the things that are wrong. But at the same time, celebrate all the great things we're doing and start changing the message from either, well, we can't do that, or we can't do it all, or why would you want to do that, to yes, we can do all this. But another thing I think we have to really come to grips with, or individually, and some of us that are on the board of Colorado Springs Forward intend to really work on this, is to get people to realize that we have to make an investment. You don't ever get very far unless you make an investment in what you really believe in. And that means not only in investing in our community by at times, none of us like taxes, and none of us like fees, and none of us like any of those things, but if we're going to have a community that works, we have to put in enough money to be able to make that happen. In addition to that, we're also a community that's very generous, philanthropically, but also rather timid about it. I was in Dallas recently, which is probably not a good comparison because everybody in Dallas, not everybody, but Dallas is a very rich place with a lot of people who have a lot of money and like to compete with each other on how much they do. And we're really not like that, but we have a lot more wealth and richness in this community than we realize, and some of us feel it's time to really change that message too. Maybe that's another parable, that we not only care, but we do what we need to do to make things work.